things. James says he's the provider of everything good and perfect. David has been through these battles. He's got his own battles, but he's been through all these battles. He's been with Saul, all of that stuff. Someone go to 1 Samuel chapter 20 and read verse 14. 1 Samuel chapter 20 and verse 14. Someone read that for me. I'll start with verse 11. 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 11 through 14 is fine. Or 15. I'll get it right. 1 Samuel 20, 11 through 15. Someone read it.
Come out to the field with me, Jonathan replied, and they went out there together. Then Jonathan told David, I promise by the Lord, the God of Israel, that by this time tomorrow, or the next day at the latest, I will talk to my father and let you know at once how he feels about you. If he speaks favorably about you, I will let you know. But if he is angry and wants you killed, may the Lord strike me and even kill me if I don't warn you, so you can escape and live. May the Lord be with you as he used to be with my father, and may you treat me with the faithful love of the Lord as long as I live. But if I die, treat my family with this faithful love, even when the Lord destroys all your enemies from the face of the earth.
Jonathan is speaking to David, and he says to him, remember, they're trying to figure out how mad Saul is and what's going to happen and all of this stuff. And he says, may you treat me with the faithful love of the Lord as long as I live. But if I die, treat my family with this faithful love, even when the Lord destroys all your enemies from the face of the earth. Jonathan knows that God is going to use David. He says, when you destroy all the enemies from the face of the earth. And what he's asking for is David to be kind. Because again, and I think we've talked about this, when you inherit a kingship, what they did to make sure they were safe is get rid of every trace of the other family. So if I became king and there was people left from the other king's lineage, so that they would have no claim to it, so that they couldn't rise up against it, the genuine practice was kill all of them so they have no more say-so. So that would put Saul's descendants in issue. But David has made this promise in 1 Samuel chapter 20, I'll just read it, and verse 41, he says this. As soon as the boy was gone, David came out from where he had been hiding near the stone pile. Then David bowed three times to Jonathan with his face to the ground. Both of them were in tears as they embraced each other and said goodbye, especially David. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn loyal to each other in the Lord's name. The Lord is a bond between us and our children forever. Then David left, and Jonathan returned to the town. So Jonathan reminds him, God is witness this bond between us and our children forever. We come to 2 Samuel chapter 9. And there's a name that we've already read about. His name's Mephibosheth. He's Saul's grandson. Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson. So you've got Saul, Jonathan, and then Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth is in the line of Saul. He's Jonathan's son. We heard about him in 2 Samuel chapter 4 and verse 4. It said Saul's son Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth who was crippled as a child. He was 5 years old when the report came from Jezreel that Saul and Jonathan had been killed in battle. When the child's nurse heard the news, she picked him up and fled. But as she hurried away, she dropped him and he became crippled. So we know from Mephibosheth's story, at 5 years of age, the nanny hears that Saul and Jonathan are dead. In a mad panic and rush, she grabs Mephibosheth, who's 5 years of age, and drops him. And when he's dropped, he's crippled for the rest of his life. And so there's still people in Saul's line still around. Jonathan is gone, Saul is gone, but here's Mephibosheth in the middle of nowhere, we'll find out. And God has been really, really, really good to David. And God has blessed David, and God has put David in a position of power and peace and prosperity. And it's kind of then when you really figure out what you like, right? When God has been so good to you, then we keep saying it, but our natural reaction should be to find someone else to be good to. David is king. So he gets all the stuff, and yet God speaks to him. And in verse 1 it says, one day David asked. I don't think he's just randomly asking. God has got him in this position. He's been blessed. He hasn't had to, he's winning all these fights. He's done all this stuff. And it says, David asked because he remembers. You ever made a promise that you can't keep at the time, but you've made a promise? David has sworn that he would take care of Jonathan's family because he loved Jonathan so much. It's counterintuitive to what normally would happen because that's not who you would help. But because of Jonathan, David has agreed, I'll take care of your family. So David, one day, I believe inspired by the Spirit of God, asks, is anyone in Saul's family still alive? Anyone to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? So Saul, Jonathan is dead, and Mephibosheth now is going to come, and we're going to see this amazing kindness. And this is exactly what's meant to be happen. When God is kind to you, does it help you? Yes. Does it encourage you? Yes. But God's kindness towards you enables you to be kind to someone else. When you experience God's kindness, it allows you to want other people to experience that. God is kind to you, not just for kindness' sake, not just for your sake. God is kind to you so that then you can be kind to other people. God has been really, really kind to David, right? And he says, is there anyone in Saul's family that I can help? I want to show kindness to them. And notice what he says, for whose sake? For Jonathan's sake. I made a vow, I made a bond, I love Jonathan, I owe him this, I want to do this, but it's like he didn't do it straight away. He waited until the time was right, until he had the position, the power, he wasn't fighting. And he says, hey, I need to know, is anyone still alive? Verse 2, he summoned a man named Ziba, who had been one of Saul's servants. So King David summons Ziba, who's been a servant of Saul, and he said, are you Ziba? The king asked. Yes, sir, I am, Ziba replied. Verse 3, the king asked him, is anyone still alive from Saul's family? If so, I want to show God's kindness to them. This is kind of amazing, really, right? Because David isn't putting any kind of parameters on who gets the kindness. They have to be in Saul's family, but other than that, he's not saying, well, they have to be this, that. Hold on, I just want to show kindness to somebody. I just want to bless somebody. Ziba replied, one of Jonathan's sons is still alive. He's crippled in both feet. Why he tells that, you can kind of figure out, I guess. But the first thing Ziba says is, there is a guy that's alive. There is a person that's alive. His name is Mephibosheth, and he has been crippled in both feet since he was 5 years of age. Now, in every story, you try and look at it from every perspective. If you're Mephibosheth, and this is what we talked about on Sunday, you see, whatever happens to us, we got to stay the course. How hard would it be for Mephibosheth to be in the middle of nowhere with 2 crippled feet, knowing a nanny dropped him? If you're Mephibosheth, you're basically hiding out. Where he's staying is a barren, total wasteland. There's nothing there. It's like he's in hiding, he's impoverished, he's got nothing, he's got nobody, and to top it off, he's crippled. You can see how he would feel, right? And you could see that at 5, he was crippled. And it seems sometimes, have you ever noticed that sometimes God's promises take a while to come to fruition, but they'll always come to fruition? God has had a plan. The moment Mephibosheth gets crippled, it looks like it's all bad. It's all over. What's going on? People would say to the lady, how did you drop him? What happened? You can understand all the rhetoric that would surround that. And yet God, in his foreknowledge, could say, hold on, it looks terrible now, but Mephibosheth getting crippled is going to end up weirdly being one of the greatest blessings of his life. Now again, if the Lord said, I want to bless you in this way, but you have to suffer like this. But Mephibosheth, it all gets turned around, but it takes a long time to turn it around. That's why you always have to trust the Lord and thank him. And you can't, when something happens in your life and you're trying to react to it, you're not going to know everything, are you? You're not going to understand what's happening. When you get a report, when something happens, when life is just really, really rough, you can't figure it all out. You're not going to know the plan. But God has this way of turning things around, but it takes him a while to turn it. I mean, he could turn it around in a minute if he wanted to. So we're from Mephibosheth, and by the way, it's almost like, yeah, he's there, but there's no point in even trying to mess with him. He's crippled, he can't do anything, he's not coming after you. And so he's still alive, he's crippled in both feet. Verse 4, David says, where is he? Where is he? And Lo-debar means pasture. It means this barren land. Where he was like there was nothing. There was no riches. There was no produce. It's this euphemism for like a lack of harvest, a lack of produce. There was nothing in Lo-debar. So here we are. He's in a horrible situation. He's gone through traumatic things. You wonder how many times he cried out to God and asked for healing or asked for whatever. He's crippled. He's in the middle of nowhere. You can see why nobody wants to be Mephibosheth, right? Nobody's thought about him. But how does this all come together? Because God asks a question. Ziba comes. Ziba says, "Hey, it's Mephibosheth." By the way, Ziba, who is in on it from the beginning, because David is just asking a question, and you have to answer the king. But Ziba will not enjoy what happens to Mephibosheth. Ziba will get jealous. He'll get bitter. You see, that's also what happens. Like no one was caring about Mephibosheth, but when God started to bless Mephibosheth, then people started to go mental. It's like, I didn't care about you, but when you get blessed, now I care about you because now you're annoying me. Because now you're getting the blessing I want. Look what happens. And there's so much in this. This is a picture of what God does for us. You realize that basically we're spiritually nothing. We're in the middle of nowhere before God reaches out, right? Like physically what Mephibosheth has, spiritually it's us. We're messed up. We can't help ourselves. We're in the middle of nowhere and we can't get access to the king. There's nothing Mephibosheth can't get to the king unless God does all of these things. And so in Lo-debar, Ziba told him at the end of verse 4, at the home of Machir, son of Ammiel. So David sent for him and brought him from Machir's home. His name was Mephibosheth. He was Jonathan's son and Saul's grandson. Listen to this. When he came to David, he bowed down to the ground in deep respect. David said, "Greetings, Mephibosheth." There's this weird moment. What do you think Mephibosheth is thinking when he's going to see David? That's definitely on his mind. I might get killed. What else? I mean, it's kind of like being, have you ever been, most of you are probably too good for this, but have you ever been called to the principal's office? Yeah. The first thing you think of is, what do they know? What have I done? Is it possible they understand what I did? What's my mom and dad going to do? Yeah. I got dragged in one time and told me I wasn't near as good as my sister. I was like, well, that shouldn't surprise you. She was like goody two-shoes. Anyway, not that I'm bitter still. It's fine. It's all of a sudden, but you've got to understand, this is yours. We're not talking about God doing this miracle a day later. You see, that's why faith is faith, because God could tell you, I'm going to do it, but it's going to be 25 years. It's going to be 30 years. It's going to be 40 years. That's why you have to trust him. And if you don't, and if you wait for him to show his hand, you're going to be miserable that whole time. Mephibosheth gets called to a meeting for the king. His mind is racing. He doesn't have a clue what to do. He can't get there, obviously, on his own. He gets taken there. And his first move, look, in verse 5, David sent for him and brought him from Machir's home. Verse 6, his name was Mephibosheth. He was Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson. He came to David. He bowed low to the ground in deep respect. And David says, "Greetings, Mephibosheth." Weird moment, right? He's bowed before the king because, well, He's a king, and that's a savvy thing to do. And what is Mephibosheth's first words to him? I am your servant. In other words, let's be friends. Mephibosheth can't do a thing. He says, I am your servant. And look at verse 7. What does David say to him? Okay, which means he was what? He was showing signs of being what? Scared to death. In other words, when Mephibosheth came in, he was showing signs of panic and fear. He bows. He tells David, I'm your servant. And David's first words are, don't fear. Don't be afraid. David said, I intend to show kindness to you because of my promise to your father. We don't even know how many people knew of this promise. David and Jonathan were in the middle of a field when they were making this promise. But David has made a promise. And this is the upstanding side of David. He made a promise. Sometimes we make a promise thinking, well, it'll be a while till I have to fulfill that. David's in a position now, and he says, and imagine if you're Mephibosheth. You've gone through all of from being 5 to being crippled to no one really. I mean, the picture is he's had a really, really hard life. He gets to the king. He wonders what's going on. David says, don't be afraid. And then he says, I'm going to show you kindness because of a promise I made to your dad, to Jonathan. I'm going to show you kindness. All of a sudden, he finds himself in front of the king, and the king is promising him kindness. That must have been like cold water. That must have been like the best news he's ever heard. He's standing in front of King David, and David says, and they would know that David and Jonathan were tight. They would know that. And he says to him, I want to show you kindness because of my promise to your father, Jonathan. This, do you see, like the backdrop to all of this is exactly what happens to us? Like we're Mephibosheth in this story. I'm not saying that's like, this is just an account of David and Mephibosheth, but the undertones of this come right back to us. Like we're Mephibosheth, and God is the king. And as messed up as our life was, and as hard as our life was, we stood in front of God one day, and he said, I intend to show you kindness. So as blessed as Mephibosheth is in the story, he's not near as blessed as we are in Jesus. I mean, think about all the hard days, all the long days, and God makes these promises. I mean, he's promised us heaven. That's taken a while to come through. But it'll come through. And Mephibosheth, this one day, wakes up and all of it. You know, it's interesting how quickly life can change either way. I mean, life can get tough like that, and life can get really good, really quick.
Look at us 2 years ago.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Life changes. And all of a sudden, it's a picture of us, this crippled man with nothing, with nobody, standing in front of the king. Well, guess what? That's me and you. And what we should do is come with fear and trembling and thank God for him and for Jesus and the Spirit. And it's like, you don't have to fear. I'm going to show you kindness. It's really cool. So this moment, this change, but again, it's been years. It's been a long time. But that's who God is. So you got to keep hoping. You got to keep trusting. Mephibosheth bows and he says, I want to show you kindness. And by the way, when someone says, I want to show you kindness, how excitable you get depends on what? Yeah, well, but before that, if someone says, I'm going to give you some money, the first thing you think is, how much are you worth? I mean, if a pauper says, I want to give you some money, it doesn't get you that excitable, does it? If Bill Gates comes up and says, hey, I want to share some of my fortune with you, you might be like, hey. David has the wherewithal now. You see, before, David couldn't be kind much. He had 400 men that turned into 600 men. You know what they had together? He had no home. He had no nothing. David, years ago, couldn't give him anything. You see the problem in that, though? I was poor, I had nothing, now God's blessed me. What is the natural tendency? Well, it should be to share. But it's to kind of hold on and think, I don't want to go back there, so I'm going to hoard it a bit. Plus, it's taken me all the time to get here. But he knows God has given him stuff, and God is calling him to do this. He had no affiliation with Mephibosheth. He didn't even know he was alive. And he said, God, I just need to do this. And God's figured it all out. And so he comes and he says, I want to show you kindness. Because of my promise to your father, I will give you all the property that once belonged to your grandfather Saul. All of a sudden, Mephibosheth just jumped a few rings on the social scale. Now notice it's funny because he never heals him. God never heals him. And see, God gets to choose how he's blessed. I don't know what Mephibosheth would have chosen. I don't know if God said, I got a plan for you, or I can heal your crippledness. I don't know what he would have chosen. But David says, I'm going to show you kindness. And Mephibosheth stands there. And he says, all the land. And by the way, how much do you think Saul had? Look at what his promise is. I'll just give you it. I'll give you all the property that once belonged to your grandfather Saul. How does David do that? And by the way, how did David inherit that? How is that David's to give away? How did David conquer Saul? How did David inherit all this stuff? So what God gives you, God can take from you, right? Everything God gives you, he can ask you to release. Because it's God's. He gave you it temporary, and then our problem is we hoard it. We want to hold on to it. We really love when God blesses us, but when he calls us to bless other people, that's not quite as fun. David doesn't flinch. That's what I'm saying. David's intriguing. Like, land, give you away. Women, that's a problem. I mean, this is David. Like, I can fight Goliath, no problem. I'm in. I can give land away like it's no problem at all. But this over here, I've got a problem. It's wild. And so he said, you imagine what Mephibosheth is thinking. But do you see, and I want to re-emphasize this point, it's easy to be excited now, right? When God's shown his hand. After all this time, Mephibosheth, I had your back. But if that's the moment you realize that God had your back, do you know how miserable you've been for all those years? What you have to believe is, God, when I got crippled at 5 and everyone's telling me, you could relive that. You think that nanny didn't relive that moment over? If only I'd been more careful. Because we act like this is like God could have stopped that, right? And God's known it. Nobody knows about Mephibosheth, but God does. God knows where he is. God knows. We wait too long. It's like when God finally answers and shows what he was doing all along, we say, oh, you had my back. But you've got to know that from the beginning. You have to know that. Today, he may or he may not, but I'm going to stand with him and for him. Anyway, he promises all this land. And then this is brilliant. This is so amazing. And this is because David's promised. It's because God's calling him to it. It's because of his relationship with Jonathan. You understand, this guy has gone from nothing. And now what does he offer him? He says, you can have the land, but there's something even bigger. There's something even better. You couldn't sell this on eBay. What does he get? He gets to eat at his table. What does that mean? Now, I want you to catch this picture because this is us. You read Psalm 23, you pour oil on my head. You prepare a feast before me in the presence of my enemies. Okay, who gets to eat at the king's table? Who gets to eat? Only his family. Only you got to be somebody. You got to be somebody to eat at the king's table, right? You got to be somebody to eat at the king's table, because at the king's table it's reserved for his family, for his people. And what else are you assured of when you eat at the king's table? You're definitely going to get good food, but there's also this kinship, this protection. Like if you're at the king's table and people know you're at the king's table, there's protection, there's provision, there's power, there's all kinds of stuff. And here's what's really interesting. Here's what they say. When Mephibosheth sits at the table and you push his seat in, you know no one sees anymore? Nobody would know he was crippled. If you walked in at that table, he's sitting at the table, his feet would be covered. Nobody would ever look at him and know, man, that you're a crippled person, that you were in Lodabar. And do you understand that the picture again is that's you and me at the table? You understand you get to sit at the king's table? And at the king's table, he takes care of all your infirmities. Like, God, as good as it was to sit at David's table, it's much better to sit at God's table. And God has redeemed. You might be this, that, or the other. And God looks at you and says, because of Jesus, you're worthy to sit here. Mephibosheth can't sit there and be like, woo, I knew I was going to make this. Look at me, I'm something. Hold on. God likes to take the weak things to what? He likes to take the weak things to confound the wise. You think Mephibosheth is there like, I knew this? And do you think he's like, hey, get me more? Like, how does he even put into words, how did I go from where I was 2 days ago to sitting at the king's table? It's all because of the grace of the king. It's all because he wanted to show me kindness. Well, that's us, isn't it? You know how you get entrance to the table? Jesus. Jesus allows you to sit at his table. And at his table, all your infirmities, all your stuff goes away. And all you do is, you see, in the midst of, if you are sitting with Jesus at the table, you're so in awe of him, you forget even what your problems are. And you don't sit at the table wondering about provision anymore, or protection anymore, or help anymore. It's right there. It's right. You imagine having a bad day and sitting with Jesus at the dinner table? Yeah. I mean, now Mephibosheth gets access to the king's table. I mean, David, by the way, David isn't just, here's what's crazy. Jonathan says, will you just be kind to my family? Well, what does that mean? Well, yeah, but I mean, what level does that mean? I mean, if I say I'll be kind to somebody, what does that mean? Who defines what kindness is? Like, oh, how much kindness? I mean, if you're expecting $1 million from me, then I won't be that kind. I can't be that kind. But David isn't just kind. He's like over and above kind. Like David said, I'll be kind to him. Well, he could have given him far less than he did. But just like God does for us, he doesn't just give us a little bit. When you say God is kind, what we really mean is he's lavish in his kindness. Like David wasn't just kind. He was to the nth degree. I'll give you land and you can sit at my table. And imagine all the lies of the devil that is quashed at that table. Nobody loves me. Nobody cares. God, where are you? God, what are you doing? How come this happened? All of those questions. And when he sits at the table of the king, guess what? They're all answered. Look at what he says. You can have the property that once belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will eat here with me at the king's table. Mephibosheth bowed respectfully and exclaimed, listen to this. Who is your servant? Listen to how he thought about himself. That you should show kindness to a dead dog like me. That's how he saw himself. That's how he felt. I don't think that's like just saying it just to say it. He saw him. How much use is a dead dog? He saw himself. You know what? You realize that's basically the humility you need to get saved, right? You have to understand that before heaven, before God, without him, you're a dead dog. Now, that's a kick on the pride, on the woo. People outside would never want to, like, you have to become like a dead dog. Like, I don't have any use. I'm dead. I'm useless. I can't do anything. Mephibosheth says, who am I? Who am I? And by the way, when it says he exclaimed, do you think he got a bit loud? You think he got a bit excitable? Who is your servant? Oh, here's the thing. Mephibosheth, you're nothing. Who are we? We're dead dogs. I mean, God isn't lavish on us because we're something. God lavishes because he's promised and because we're now adopted into his family. And it's an amazing picture. This whole story, if you start to think about you before the king, you start to see how Mephibosheth felt. He says, who is your servant? You have allowed such kindness to a dead dog like me. And just when you think it's over, and just when you think everything hasn't been sorted, God steps in again. Listen to what happens. The king summoned Saul's servant Ziba. Hold on. Who is he? He's Saul's servant. How loyal has he been? Apparently very. And I'll say it again. Here's what's tricky about the kindness of God. Everybody loves the kindness of God until it seems to bypass you and hit somebody else. Ziba, by the way, what has Mephibosheth done for the cause? How much has he helped with Saul's stuff? He hasn't. Ziba is one of Saul's main men. He's still being loyal even after Saul's dead. If anyone's going to get blessed, if anyone deserves a seat at the table, guess who it is? Old Ziba. Can you imagine that? And God, now David calls Ziba in. You see, you try and put yourself in everyone's position, right? In David's position, he's heard God, he's got it, he's given it. Mephibosheth has been on this roller coaster. And now, listen, imagine what would happen if you were Ziba. The king summoned Saul's servant Ziba and said, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. What did Ziba not say? Hallelujah. What about me? What did he think he was going to get? He's basically said, I don't know what Ziba was thinking, but if he had any kind of ideas about getting this kind of inheritance, guess what? It's just gone, and it's gone to who? Now, in some ways you understand it, it's his grandkid, all right. But old boy's been away. He's like that guy that no one knows about, the kid over there that can't do anything. And we'll see it. I don't know if we'll see it tonight. We might. It's wild. It's wild what happens. It's wild. You think Ziba's this great character until you start to read more, and it's like you can see that even when God is kind, people go crazy. You see, when Mephibosheth is dropped and he becomes a cripple, not many people are jumping up and down shouting about the kindness of God. Now, they should be, but they're not, right? When God blesses other people, we're not. What I'm trying to say is, even when God is kind, we mess it up. We mess it up. Like, because he's not kind. Even when he's kind to us, do we fully enjoy it sometimes? Why, even when God's kind to us, do we still have a problem? Think about that. This is real. Like, no one's going to admit it. I get it. But when God says, I'm going to be kind to you, what do you think? You have an idea of what? If God walked in tonight and said, whoa, I can promise you I'm going to be kind to you tomorrow, you would walk out of here and say, hot dog, we're getting some money. Or whatever you want that blessing to be. Oh, I'm going to get whatever. And how much do you want to bet that whatever you go to bed excited about tonight, it's not the way that God's going to show you kindness? Oh, you ever had that Christmas, like you know what that gift is and you're pumped? Woo, she did it. She bought me that. I know she did. And you open it and you try and hide your face like, oh yeah, great. Part of faith in God is trusting that when he gives you a present, it's the best one. And Ziba struggles. For Mephibosheth, he's getting more than he could ever ask for. And look, if he's ticked now, he's about to be even more mad. Look at what it says. I've given him everything. And by the way, you and your sons and servants are to farm the land for him to produce food for your master's household. Look, Ziba, I've given all the land to Mephibosheth. Here's the deal. Mephibosheth can't till or can't do the land. He's crippled. So guess who gets to do it? You and your kids and your servants will work all day for who? You can see why. You see, even, let's just be honest. If you're Ziba, how many of you are struggling? Nobody. Glory, hallelujah. We should just. How many of you are upset or fighting being upset? Not only did I watch all the land be given away, but now I have to. I'm working it so he can eat. So for Saul's household, I think he gets a share of that. But this is basically you have to do it because he can't. And by the way, whilst you're doing that and whilst you're making food for your own family and for Saul's household and all these people, look at what he says. You'll be out there working, but Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will eat here at my table. Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Kind of gives you an idea of how much work they had to do, huh? I mean, if he's got 15 sons or 20 servants, why didn't the servants just do it? But look at what he says. You and your sons and your servants. In other words, there's a lot to do. And you know who's looking out the window saying, oh, Mephibosheth, the tables turn. God ever turn the tables on you? You see, God has the right to turn the tables. And your attitude and your worship and your honor should be the same. See, we know that God turns the tables, right? He changes our fortunes. Sometimes we go from little to what? And sometimes we go from lot to, whether you're talking about financial stuff, whether you're talking about physical ailments, health. We were healthy and then we're not. What changes? What's to change? When you're rich or when you're poor, when you're hungry or when you're satisfied, what's to change? Nothing. You're meant to be what? What does Paul say? I've learned how to be what? Thankful, content. And Lord, whatever my lot is, remember what we sing? Whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say. Oh, hold on. There's a challenge. You see, you know what's weird if you track this story? All of them struggle with singing it as well. When David is getting chased for 10 years of his life against Saul, how many renditions of it as well you think were getting chunked up? Now David's king and he's got a palace and he's winning all these fights. It as well is like on repeat. Mephibosheth has never maybe sang it as well since he was 5 years of age, but now he's busting out with it. Ziba, you think if they said, let's all pause, Ziba, you lead us in prayer or worship, you think Ziba's up to it? It depends what he's like, right? But what we have to understand is that you're not really serving David, nor are you serving Mephibosheth. The challenge is you have to understand that you're serving who? And if you understand you're serving God and not them, everything changes. When you understand that you're serving God and not a person, because if you think you're serving a person, your emotions are going to mess you up. They're going to do you dirty, they're going to do you wrong, you're going to give up, you're going to quit. But when you're serving God, everything is different. And look at what it says. Ziba replied, yes, my lord the king, I am your servant, and I will do all that you have commanded. And from that time on, Mephibosheth ate regularly at David's table, like one of the king's what? Sounds familiar, huh? You're eating at the king's table like one of his children, adopted by kindness and grace. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah. From then on, all the members of Ziba's household were Mephibosheth's servants. All the members of Ziba's household were now servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth, who was crippled in both feet, lived in Jerusalem and ate regularly at the king's table. Do you see how that verse sums everything up? If you only read half that verse, you only get half the story, and you may get a different reaction. Mephibosheth, what did you say? I don't know if he ate at the table, but he'd eat of the provisions. That's a good question. I don't think they let all of his family. Well, he's only got one. I think it was Mephibosheth, which is weird, right? Because now you're eating at the table and your kid can't. I don't think his kid would. No, I think it would be reserved for. I wouldn't bet all my money on that, but I'm pretty sure that you have to be invited to that. And that's why Ziba is working to provide food for all of this. Mephibosheth was crippled in both feet, lived in Jerusalem, and ate regularly at the king's table. He's gone from Lodabar to Jerusalem, and he eats regularly at the king's table. Is God good to him or not? God turned it all around. Do you mean he can help a helpless cripple? Yeah, he can. He did. What really gets interesting? Go to 2 Samuel chapter 16 a minute and we'll try and finish. Absalom, David's son, gets crazy. David escapes from Jerusalem. He's running for his life. And in chapter 16, 2 Samuel 16, and we'll get there, so I won't go too deep into it because we're going to get there. When David had gone a little beyond the summit of the Mount of Olives, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, was waiting there for him. David is on the run again. He has to leave Jerusalem. It says, there is Ziba. He had 2 donkeys loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 bunches of summer fruit, and a wineskin full of wine. What are these for? The king asked Ziba. The donkeys are for the king's people to ride on, and the bread and summer fruit are for the young men to eat. The wine is for those who become exhausted in the wilderness. And look at what David asks. He's got all this stuff, everything's been taken care of, and even David pauses, and what does he ask? And where is Mephibosheth? Saul's grandson, the king asked him. Where's Mephibosheth at? And look at the end. He said, he stayed in Jerusalem. He stayed in Jerusalem. He said, today I will get back the kingdom of my grandfather Saul. Hold on. Yeah, but hold on. Before you start going, you know there's always 2 sides. Well, there's really 3 sides to every story, right? Your side, my side, and what? The whole truth. This is amazing, and you can read commentaries and they'll take sides. What Ziba just said is grounds for death. I told you that the way that is why you kill people. So that they cannot say in their family line, we're going to take our line back. That's why you kill them all. David hasn't done that. He's been gracious to Mephibosheth. And what David hears is, oh boy has stayed back. He knows I'm on the run and he's going to come against me now. He's going to take all my kindness and all my loyalty and he's playing the fool. What's crazy is David doesn't have, he doesn't have any proof. He can't think about it much. And he said, in that case, the king told Ziba, I give you everything Mephibosheth owns. He hears it and he what? He responds straight away. Probably not the greatest thing to do, huh? He hears one side. Watch. Don't just listen to one side of it. You have to listen to both. I've told you before, it's kind of funny, but it's serious. I do some counseling sometimes with couples or whatever, and when they sit and one speaks, you swear it's the other person's fault. I mean, they're the worst husband ever. She's told me. Like, this is awful. And you're just ready to, like, dudes and, And then he comes in and you're like, that's not what she said at all. Like, she's the crazy one. And by the end of it, you're like, I don't know who it is. Because they said this and they said that, and he'd never done the dishes. And the first thing he says is, man, I do the dishes every night. I'm like, well, someone's lying. Right. Ziba says, oh, old boy's a traitor. And David says, you can have everything I've given Mephibosheth. And Ziba bows and says, oh, I just want to please you, my king. Go to chapter 19. Story gets even crazier. Verse 24. So David was on the run from Jerusalem, and now guess what? He comes back. He's back in Jerusalem. Mephibosheth in chapter 19, verse 24. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, came down from Jerusalem to meet the king. He had not cared, listen to this, he had not cared for his feet, trimmed his beard, or washed his clothes since the day the king left Jerusalem. Mephibosheth didn't wash himself, didn't take care of himself. Mephibosheth has gone on a bad path. He's distraught that David has left. Not exactly the same story, is it? He's mourning for the king. And look at what it says. David, before you read it, what do you think David's first question is? Well, David's question is, why did you come with me? Why didn't you come with me, Mephibosheth? Why didn't you come with me? That's got to hurt David. I've been so kind to you, and now you're trying to pull one over on me. Why didn't you come? Mephibosheth said, my lord the king, my servant Ziba deceived me. I told him, saddle my donkey so I can go with the king. For as you know, I'm crippled. Ziba has slandered me by saying that I refuse to come. But I know that my lord, the king, is like an angel of God, so do what you think is best. All my relatives and I could expect only death from you, my lord. But instead you have honored me by allowing me to eat at your own table. What more can I ask? What do you think David's thinking at this moment? One of them's lying. You've said enough, David replied. I've decided that you and Ziba will divide your land equally between you. So he gave it all to Mephibosheth. He thinks Mephibosheth's a traitor, so he gives it all to Ziba. He hears this other story, and it's almost like he doesn't know what. So he just gives half and half. But then look what happens, and this is why I think Mephibosheth is telling the truth. What does Mephibosheth say? Give it all away. I'm just glad that you are safely back again. Now, go and read a commentary. One will say Ziba's lying, the other will say Mephibosheth is lying. If you ask me, I think Mephibosheth is in the right here. But we'll get into this when we get there. But don't be too quick to judge like situations. Especially, don't be too quick to think a situation is terrible, is bad, there's no goodness in it. Because sometimes those are the best situations of your life. Being crippled led Mephibosheth to the king's table. And meant something even more. It meant something even more because of his state. David is he's on the run coming out of Jerusalem, so he has to make a quick decision. Mephibosheth hasn't taken care of himself, and he says, look, I don't want any of the land. All we deserve is death. I'm just glad you're here. We'll talk about that more when we get there. But I hope you see tonight the picture that why we should leave here feeling like, man, I was that dead dog. I was that dead dog, but I found grace. And you know what we should be able to say to God? Take whatever you want. Take whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here. If you can get there, the devil won't ever get you. Take whatever you want. I'm just glad I've got Jesus. And guess what? Jesus will never leave you, can never be taken. He's like, you can have half the land. He's like, forget it. I'm just glad you're here. If we had that, then the devil can do what he wants with our stuff. The one person he can't get rid of. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts? We'll get more into that when we